Hello and welcome back to Granted Gardens. This is the week of Thanksgiving and I actually have off work all week this week. So I'm planning on shooting quite a few videos throughout the week to share with just some stuff that I'll be working on around the house. Today, the video focus is going to be on something that is very dear to my heart, something that my mother has always made growing up and is like comfort food for me. There's a little dispute within the family about what it actually is supposed to be called, but I'm gonna call it what my mom refers to it as, and it's my mom's vegetable soup. My dad will argue that it is not vegetable soup, it is cabbage soup, but I will leave that up to you guys to decide what you'd like to call it. I will be calling it vegetable soup. So we're gonna go ahead and walk through the kitchen here. I'm gonna show you some of the stuff that you'll need to make this. It's very easy, very simple. It can basically be made out of stuff that you just have lying around the house. So I'll go ahead and I'll show you what you need to get started, and then we will walk you through how to make my mom's vegetable soup. So here is everything that you're gonna need, the essential ingredients for making mom's vegetable soup. So I start out with some celery, green peppers, onion, carrots, cabbage, most important, some chopped mushrooms, and over here, last but not least, I've got diced tomatoes. So this is the basic ingredients. Now obviously I'm not going to use all of this for this soup. Like I'm not going to use all these carrots, but I probably won't use all the celery either. But just depending on how large of a pot, how many portions you're making, and what you prefer is going to be how much of everything that you're going to put in. So I'll kind of make this up as I go. Then we get more into the broth. Now if you want an easy broth, you can go ahead and pick up just packaged chicken or beef broth. I think that for my size pan that I have, about 3 or 4 of these would be plenty. So you can get it prepackaged, and then you can skip a really lengthy step of getting the broth boiled and set and seasoned. So you can start with just that, or you can do a different route. So one thing that my mom always had when she made her vegetable soup was a ham bone. A ham bone was like the best addition to that soup. It was delicious. So after we had ham, we'd go ahead, we'd pick all the meat off, we'd save the bone, freeze it, and then whenever we made soup, we'd pull it out right out of the freezer, put it right in the water, bring it to a boil, and that would really help put flavor into the soup. Well, we don't have a ham bone, but we do have a bone that was saved from a meal. It was like only a couple weeks ago. I honestly don't remember what it was. But we saved the bones from a meal a few weeks ago, and I froze them, so I'm going to go ahead and start with that. So I'll walk you through how I make my broth, but like I said, if you want to cut this part out, or if you don't really want to invest the time into it, or if you don't have bones in your freezer, you can go ahead and just start with the regular broth that you can get packaged at the store. Now the version of the bone broth that I'm going to share with you today to get our soup started is not the lengthy, involved version of bone broth. So some people would say I'm cheating a little bit, but hey, it's how my mom did it. It's good to me, so I'm gonna stick with it. But I did do a full bone broth batch probably about a month ago with a bunch of bones that we had in the freezer. And so I've got that I went ahead and I batched and froze. So this is legit bone broth. Like we put a bunch of bones in, I let it sit all day for hours and hours and hours, and that's what I got out of it. So I have a few, as you can see, canisters of that here today that I'm just right now letting sit on the counter to thaw out just enough so that I can get them out of the containers. I'm gonna go ahead and add that to my soup too. But for starting off, we're just gonna start with this bone that I have and some water. So I'll walk you through that. And then I'll show you real quick the rest of the ingredients. So as far as seasoning goes, a lot of this really goes based off of taste. I actually asked my mom if she had a recipe before I made this video, so I had something to go off of. But she says that there is no recipe, she just makes it up. I've done it a couple times before and I've come darn close to mom's perfection. Not quite there, but I have faith that I can get us pretty close. So I've got some coriander seeds, Bay leaves, I know that's a must. Parsley, fennel seed, and then of course black pepper. A lot of this is going to go based off of taste. So as I'm cooking, I'll taste a little bit and figure out what else I need in there. So this, what we have laid out, could change dramatically, or it could be perfect. So I'm not sure, we'll see. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start our broth. So the first thing you wanna do is get out any of your frozen bones that you have, get a very large pot, and put the bones into the pot and fill them with water. Make sure that they're well covered, or as covered as you possibly can get. My bone's a little odd long, so I don't know that it's going to fit in this pot, but we're gonna do the best we can. Perfect. Cold water. While I'm filling that up, now we want to make sure that we start with cold water. We want to make sure that the water that we put in over the bones is cold, because if you add warm water, it's actually the action between the cold water heating up that kind of helps pull the nutrients out of those bones. So if you add warm water or already hot water, you're kind of taking that step away from the length and time that it takes to pull those nutrients out. So we're going to start with cold water. We're going to go ahead and turn our heater or our burner on high. Okay, so that amount should be good. There's still a little bit sticking out, but that's okay. We'll move it around as it goes. We want to make sure that it doesn't get too high to where it boils over. So we're going to stick with this. At this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to set the pot on the burner, put the lid on it, bring it to a full boil. Once it's brought down to a full boil, then you can put it down to probably like medium high, just enough so that it's not boiling over, but it's still boiling pretty good, and let it go for at least an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this. Wait for it to boil. Once it boils, turn it down a bit so that it's still boiling but doesn't boil over. Let it go for an hour, and I will be back with you guys once that is done. Okay, so I'm at just over 2 hours of cooking, boiling the bones at this point, and at an hour would have been fine for me to shut it off, but I'll show you exactly what I'm looking for to decipher when I think it's time to pull the bones out. Okay, so if you can see closely here, you can see where the bone looks really, really dry. That's what you're looking for. You want to wait till you get to the point where the bone looks like everything's literally been sucked out of it and it's super dry. Another thing that you'll look for is that there is no meat left on the bone. At this point, it's time. You can go ahead and take the bone out. Now, you will also have bits floating around, maybe skin that came off. You can go ahead and skim all of this off or pull that out as well. You just want to get down to just the broth. But you'll also notice too how dark the broth is. Note that it was just water I put in here initially over top of that bone. Now look how dark the bone is, and then you can see some of the oils floating on top. That's what you're looking for. Now it's at this point too that it helps that I have some extra beef broth stocked, just in case I run low on the broth, because you'll notice that from the point that we set it on the stove to now, it's down about half of the liquid. So I'm gonna keep my beef broth that I had frozen on hand just in case, but we're gonna start going ahead and putting some of the vegetables in, because that'll fill up pretty quick. So I'm gonna go ahead and start adding my onions and my seasonings. So you just watched me add 1 whole onion chopped. Depending on your taste, you can either chop it fine or not. Probably about a teaspoon of pepper, teaspoon of parsley, teaspoon of coriander, teaspoon of fennel seed, and 3 bay leaves. So we're gonna let that go for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and then come back, taste test, add what's needed. If nothing else is needed for the broth at that point, then we'll go ahead and start adding the rest of the vegetables. Okay, so we're about halfway through my 45 minute time that I mentioned after I put the onions in, and I'm making an executive decision. The pot is like a third of the way full now. So there's 2 options here. If you find yourself at this point where you did boil the bones, the chances are is what's in there is pretty well boiled down. You can taste it, and you might be able to just add water. It might have enough flavor to it where you can add a few cups of water to get you back to that point. I'm gonna do a quick taste test, but I'm thinking I'm gonna use some of my frozen bone broth to add to the equation here. So after tasting it, yep, I'm gonna go ahead and add some more of my bone broth. Really what I was looking for in the flavor was to see if it was a heavy enough flavor that adding water wouldn't dilute it too much. Again, I just used 1 bone. Usually when you do bone broth like this, you have multiple bones, 5 or 6 pounds worth. So that's why it's not quite as flavorful. So I'm gonna go ahead and add this in. Obviously this is still pretty well frozen, so this is gonna set us back a little bit. So again, we're gonna turn the temperature up till it boils, and then once it boils and this is melted, we can turn it back down. Once we get to that point, then we can add our vegetables. All right, so we've got the frozen broth placed inside here. Obviously everything around here stopped boiling pretty much instantaneously. So we're gonna go ahead and turn this back up to high again. Let this get to a boil, let the frozen stuff melt, and then we will go into turning down the temperature and adding the vegetables. All right, so it's back to a boil. Our frozen broth is completely unfrozen. We're gonna go ahead and turn this back down. Let it get down to a slow boil and add our veg. So at this point I went ahead, it's all melted down. I went ahead and did taste test, loving the taste. I'm gonna move forward with just adding the veg. So at this point it's just about chopping it up and throwing it in. We're gonna start with the green peppers. Mushrooms. Celery. Carrots. Now the amount that I put in is really going to vary depending on what vegetables you like, how much of each you want to put in. I think I put in about 3 or 4 carrots, maybe 5 large sticks of celery. And so we're going to let this go probably for another 45 minutes. The reason behind that is that the carrots and the celery need to cook down a little bit before we go ahead and throw our cabbage in, because the cabbage will cook a little bit quicker. So I'm gonna let this sit for 45 minutes on medium-high heat. Let those vegetables kind of stew in this a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and throw in the cabbage and the tomatoes. So once we get to this point, we've let the carrots and the celery and such cook for a little while. I've done it about half an hour. We're gonna go ahead and start adding our cabbage. Now, you can chop up your cabbage however you like. I really kind of like them more in like this shape. So this is usually the direction that I go when I'm chopping my cabbage for this. I love the cabbage. I like having big chunks of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and chop the cabbage and toss it in. Don't get worried when you put the cabbage in that you don't have enough broth. You will. The cabbage will cook down. But I went ahead and put a whole head of cabbage in, and now the last part is just to go ahead and add the tomatoes, and then we're gonna let this cook again for another 45 minutes to an hour, come back and check on it. So at this point moving forward, it really just comes down to the way it looks, if everything looks like it's cooked, and then taste test if it needs a little bit of something here and something there. The rest of this is totally made up from this point on. So I'll show you adding the tomatoes. So these are my tomatoes. We've got a 1 pound, 12 ounce can, so 28 ounces of diced tomatoes. It doesn't matter if they're diced, it doesn't matter, whatever your preference is. I do not drain it. I do not drain it because I want the juice. All right, so after we get that emptied out, this is what it looks like. So again, that cabbage is going to cook down quite a bit. So you just want to go ahead and kind of make sure that you get it all in there good with the rest of your broth. And then put a lid on it and let it cook again for about 45 minutes to an hour. So our cabbage has been boiling now in the rest of the soup for an hour, and everything looks good to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and share with you what my final product looks like. Yum! So there it is. That is done. Now you can let this, turn off the heat and let this sit because you want to let it cool down before you put it in the fridge anyways. But this is ready to serve. And as I said too, as far as when I was saying letting it sit, you want to make sure that you continuously stir from the bottom. And if you are turning off the heat but letting it sit on the burner for a while, continue to really get down to the bottom and make sure that you're stirring from the bottom so that nothing's sitting too long on the bottom of the pan. But that's it, it's done. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me today. I know that that was a long recipe, but it's totally worth it, I promise. And if you guys get an opportunity to make this yourself, please let me know how you like it. If you do add or take away anything and you like it better, I'm interested in hearing what you do differently. So if you can comment or feel free to shoot me an email. My email address is listed below. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to sharing more with you soon.